Hey guys, what's up? Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/EggsShow. That's EGGSSHOW. Audible has more than 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or just about any device you can imagine. As Eggs listeners, you can download a free audiobook today by visiting audibletrial.com/EggsShow.
Welcome to another action-packed episode of Eggs. Today's guest is Chris Daley. Chris is a digital marketing entrepreneur with a passion for helping businesses succeed online. After spending years driving traffic through SEO and digital marketing efforts, Chris turned his attention to the study of user experience. In 2014, he started his conversion optimization agency, Dayley Conversion, which he's later merged with his most recent venture, Disruptive Advertising, where he currently works as VP of Site Testing and Optimization. They offer full-service A/B testing solutions for clients, including strategy, design, development, and analytics. Here to talk to us about all that and so much more is our guest, Chris Daley. Welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you for making the time, and sorry for the rescheduling.
Yeah, so the rescheduling Mike's talking about we've been basically jerking Chris around for a month between a cancellation early on for anyone who listens to the show back when Mike's house got robbed. And then later we booked him again for just earlier this week, and then had to bump again because I happened to be out of town. So anyway, we finally made it work.
We made it happen.
Yeah, so thank God for his patience and putting up with us, because generally we like to be the one and done. You know, we like to get you booked, and then we like to do the show and then call it good. But yeah, this one's been a mess to get together. So thanks for making the time and for traveling in. You know, it was a little bit of a commute for you, so we appreciate it.
Oh, we made it happen. I'm excited.
So I read somewhere that you were voted least likely to succeed in high school. And first off, that's rude. How is that even a thing? I mean, like, how is that okay to do? But second, was that like a driving factor for you to kind of get to where you are today? That would light a fire under my ass and get me going.
So no, funny enough, those kinds of things did not actually motivate me when I was younger. So in high school, I was kind of a lazy video gamer. And I think, I don't know if I was actually voted least likely to succeed by my high school, but my mom did actually share with me that out of all of her kids, she was the most surprised that I found some kind of a passion. And it wasn't until, I was not a very good student in high school. I ended up starting college, and I wasn't a very good college student either, mostly just because I had not found my passion yet.
100%. I'm right there with you. I barely got out of high school, and then I was doing the Running Start program at the same time, and so it was just kind of like it didn't help my college thing at the same time. And then 10 years later, I went back for audio recording, and straight A's. It's amazing how once you find something that you like and enjoy, you dive in and you.
Well, it's an interesting system that we have, right? Because we sort of encourage everyone to go right into college just as a thing you're supposed to do. And yeah, I mean, like, speaking to your point about passion. I mean, you're 18 years old. I mean, how do you know what your passion is? I mean, you have no idea. Unless you're one of the lucky ones, or if you just know you're going to be a veterinarian and you need to go to school and get started on that, I guess. But for just about every other trade, I mean, most people probably don't know that passion from the jump. So speaking of passion, so you stumbled across your passion, and we know you as somebody that's involved in SEO, digital marketing, things like that. How did you land on that?
So it was kind of by accident, and I view it as kind of like a serendipitous opportunity. I was looking for a job while I was in college, and I ended up at a relative's house, and like some second cousin or something of mine who I literally have never seen since happened to be there. And I mentioned I was looking for a job, and she said, "Oh, we've got some sales positions open. You could come in and do sales." And it was a SEO agency. And I didn't know anything about SEO. I was just interested in a job.
Wanted a paycheck.
Right.
Yeah, right.
And
More interested in money.
Right. So I went in and ended up doing sales for this agency. And as I started to learn what SEO was, I became fascinated by, I use Google every day. Every person uses Google every day. And I had no idea what all the stuff that was going on behind the scenes. And that there was somebody or a large number of people that were influencing the stuff that I was searching for on Google was really interesting to me. And so I ended up, after probably 4 months of doing sales, applying for a job internally to do SEO. And that's kind of how I ended up starting to build a skill set around SEO. Now, there's a steep learning curve with any type of digital marketing because there is a lot of technical skills that are accompanied with the idea. And so it took me a long time to get up to speed, but I was finally willing to put in the time. And I actually dropped out of college once I ended up in a career in SEO because I realized pretty quickly that
it wasn't necessary.
It was I could get a lot more value-wise and education-wise by putting my time.
What were you doing in college?
I was studying marketing, oddly enough. And the funny thing is, what I do now today involves a lot of psychology, understanding how users behave. And when I took a psychology class in college, I hated it.
And now it's really understanding user patterns and the way people behave when they're served ads or whatever.
Right.
User experience on a website and whatnot. So it's interesting. I just want to get your perspective. I mean, you're a young guy, so I don't know, but it sounds like, I mean, you've sort of followed the same path as me. I'm actually 18 credits short of graduating, and all I have left are some, like Spanish 101 and 2. Like, I mean, I have like a bunch of nonsense, but I just have never gone back and finished.
You know the class that I'm waiting to get my degree on?
Tell me it's English.
Nope, it's acoustics. And
oh, well, that would have been useful. The studio would have been much better off. So anyway, so I have for a long time, and maybe you've discovered this too, because I'm a designer, art director, stuff by trade, but like I didn't learn anything in school that actually helped me move that needle. Like I actually got out, and the way it came about for me was just hard work and teaching myself how stuff worked, and in fact now it's probably why I'm not the best business person in the world, but I'm a damn good creative. And so I wonder, we've had a lot of people on the show, and every now and then I take these stands. I think I'm mostly just looking for people to serve as evidence for my thoughts on things.
Back you up.
But, because I'm insecure and I need affirmation. But we've talked to a number of different people, guys who own online education platforms, things like that, non-traditional college education, basically. And so I wondered what your thought is about the importance of college education in, sort of, I guess, the workforce. So, like we alluded to a minute ago, tradition is you go to high school, you get into college, you do your 4 years, you start your career, like that's sort of the model that we're trained with. But obviously you found a different path. I've done the same. And so what do you think, would you place a college degree of high importance or not that importance, or do you think that other more non-traditional ways might be the way to go, or do you have an opinion at all on the matter?
I have a very strong opinion on the matter, and I err more in favor of what you guys have been describing. Now, there are some professions where a college degree is indispensable.
Right? I want my doctors to go to college.
Exactly, right? Or your lawyer to have all the formal education. For more technical, or I guess not more technical jobs, for things that are more development, design, any type of creative job, as I now interview designers and developers, I don't care whether or not they have a college degree.
You're more portfolio based.
Right.
You're just looking what they've done and go from there.
Exactly. In fact, we have a lot of... for developers out here in Utah, we've got a lot of these like Dev Mountain, 12-week development courses. And I would prefer somebody that has been through that versus somebody who's done a 4-year degree in, some
computer
kind of engineering,
science.
Or computer.
Yeah, with 80 credits of general ed and 20 credits of development.
Right.
I've heard mixed reviews on that because I've actually been doing that in my spare time. I've been working with Treehouse, and I've heard that like the boot camps are good to get you an overall kind of thing, but the practical, once you leave and try to apply for a job, when they test you, it's hard to know.
Well, I think it's because they're trying to teach you a lot. You're not focused on just
it's
one
such a short amount of period to learn all that stuff that it takes a little while after you go.
I think just to sort of extrapolate what Chris was saying about sort of, creative field and things like that, like I think really, or the way that I look at it, or the way I sort of equate, not just creative, but all technical work and stuff like that, it's sort of like the modern trade, right? Like back in the day, if you were going to be a plumber, you didn't go to college to learn to be the best plumber. You went and you worked under a great plumber, or a welder or an architect or whatever, that you went and you did your apprenticeship or your residency, I guess. And so with creative services, it's largely largely that too. Now, I'm probably, I don't know how old you are, but I'm probably enough older than you that I'm a little bit more on this cusp where half my life had no internet and the other half did. And so, which for me, I think is a real blessing because I grew up with it. I ramped up with it. I learned the early technologies early on and then sort of went with the flow as, we've progressed to now. Kids now, of course, are born into this, but I still think, everything's kind of made for them. Somebody crafted iOS so that it's perfect. They're not great at tech. They know how to run iOS.
Right.
And so I think to be proficient in these fields, sure, you can go to these boot camps, you can learn, you can do a lot of that stuff, but I think a lot of it comes from sort of internal drive and going out and learning it on your own. And I think SEO in particular is one of those things, because we actually had a guy that was an SEO expert on.
We've had two now. Yeah, Matt Silderman and who's the guy we had? Just
AJ.
Yeah,
AJ Wilcox. And so those guys, talked a lot about SEO. And for me, like I've always worked in an ad agency. For me, the agency perspective on SEO for a long time was just, it's the same way they handled social media, just let's get a social media expert, which means a 24-year-old girl that knows how to run Twitter. It doesn't actually mean strategy and all this other stuff that it means now. It's sort of evolved. But for a long time, there was kind of smoke and mirrors around it. Like if you could run Twitter, that made you an expert. And I think it was the same with SEO for a long time. SEO was sort of undefined. It was this ambiguous set of things, and it's tagging images or whatever. But like there's so much more to it than that. And so
well, one thing I didn't realize was just even your image size, like load time on a web page, makes a huge difference. And Matt brought that to our attention the other day. It's like, if a website takes more than 5 seconds to load, we lose interest and click away.
Well, and that's so one of the interesting things about what you're talking about in terms of the evolution of new jobs, and this is where we can kind of transition, like the educational part of these newer jobs, these newer creative and tech type jobs. By the time you have gone through some kind of a university, what you've learned is now outdated. Right? And so that's, I think, why there's such a huge value on the experience. And so my experience in starting my career out in SEO, again, I didn't know anything else. And so SEO was all I had. But my first kind of eye-opening moment that I didn't really have the big picture in mind was I sat down with, I think it was the CEO at the company I was working at the time, and I had all these charts and graphs to show him of all these great increases in organic search rankings and all. We had tripled our organic traffic to our website in a very short period of time, and to me that was a raging success. And then he asked, so what has that done for the business? And I went, why does it matter? Like, we got a ton of traffic. That's the metric.
The
right?
goal was traffic, right?
And as I started to look into what was happening with this traffic, I started to realize that nothing was really happening with this traffic. We weren't generating leads. We weren't generating sales from this additional traffic. It wasn't really doing much for the business. And so I had been running with blinders on, completely oblivious to the fact that, something like a strategy would have been helpful here, and something like some real business KPIs.
Can you define that for me?
Define what?
KPI.
Oh yeah, key performance indicator. Something that actually matters to someone other than me, right? Because when you're doing SEO or social media, it's like it's easy to get caught up in getting a bunch of likes or getting a bunch of followers or getting a bunch of shares or getting a bunch of traffic. And ultimately, that doesn't mean anything if it's not resulting in
if you get
conversions.
1,000 likes on something, but they don't buy anything from you, it doesn't make any
Exactly.
difference. So, so one of the things, and just I think you're kind of speaking to it, but one of the hardest things I think to do in SEO, and maybe it's getting easier, maybe you're heading to this, is attribution of, how do you really show these metrics or these different things? How does it positively affect our business? So how do you go forward now, with this perspective and more experience at this point? How do you figure out what I guess it really goes back to strategy and figuring out what your plan is so that you know what you're trying to get versus just chasing the likes.
So one of the things that we do now, and obviously it helps that I'm not doing SEO anymore. I don't know that I would want to do an SEO at this point, but one of the things that we do now that I think really helps is we start actually at the end of the funnel. So when we're working with clients or with our own marketing efforts, we want to understand, what does it take in order for us to get a sale? If we're generating leads, how many leads do we need to generate in order to close a sale? And what's our average deal size? And so then we can start to back into, okay, and so what can we pay to acquire a lead? If we close 10% of our leads and our leads cost $10 each, then
is that about an average price?
No, I'm just throwing out some easy math numbers.
Good. Yeah. Keep it to easy math. We're creatives around here. That's it.
Right. So if I close to 10% of my leads and they're $10 each, then it costs me $100 to generate a sale. And if my average deal size is $1,000, that's great. I'm paying $100 to generate $1,000 sale. Most businesses don't even understand that math. And so once you start there and understand what can I pay to acquire a sale, then I can start backing into my other marketing efforts and say, okay, so what do I need to do in order to drive leads? What does my conversion rate need to be on my traffic? Then when I start driving traffic, I can look at, because this is something that a lot of businesses don't understand, all traffic sources are not created equal. You have organic traffic, and maybe organic traffic, you convert 10% of your organic traffic, and maybe you only convert 0.5% of your social traffic. Well, if you're spending all of your time and money acquiring social traffic, you're going to be frustrated at the cost. Your costs are going to start going up, and then you're going to go, we need to cut everything because our costs are too high. When in reality, the problem is that your social conversion rates are super low.
So organic traffic is Google searches or placement in like Bing and stuff like that.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And so those are the types of things when you're talking about big picture strategy, some of the things that you need to understand aside from, because when people talk about marketing strategy, a lot of times what they're talking about is branding strategy, which is not the same thing as marketing strategy. People will say, well, we need to position ourselves as the leader in this, and we need to, we're about to release this new product, and so we need to make sure that we have a landing page built out for this and this, and those are parts of a marketing strategy. That's not the marketing strategy, though.
Right. Yeah, we run into this all the time as sort of brand experts and logo guys and stuff on our end. There is so much ambiguity between the terms. And I think it's largely just people not knowing the vernacular. So they're saying one thing but meaning something else.
Right.
But we run into this all the time. And then it's difficult, like right now we're about to engage in a branding exercise with a big commercial real estate company. And they already have like the logos and stuff, but they do need the stuff like the voice and the photography styles and color palettes and things like that, right? So we're figuring out what to communicate by way of color photography, the style of writing, those sorts of things, which will ultimately feed their marketing strategy. But we have to have that brand solved before we start marketing it. Otherwise the good that we do won't be worth anything. So it's kind of they're interwoven, but yeah, I think it's a really good point to sort of separate the two.
Well, and that kind of leads into how I ended up doing what I'm doing now. So I started out with doing SEO, and I was trying to drive a lot of traffic to websites through things like Google and Bing and Yahoo. And when I realized that a lot of that traffic wasn't converting, then the question comes up, well, why isn't it converting? And how can we make it, in air quotes, how can we make that traffic convert? And there's two fundamental questions that play into that. Number one, are we getting the right traffic? And number two, do we have the right type of experience to convert these people? And so I ended up just doing some research on Google. I discovered what I do today, which is conversion rate optimization. And the concept behind that is testing out different experiences on your website to figure out what are people looking for when they come to your website. And so that's when you're looking at marketing in general, you need to understand that there is a funnel. Not everybody is ready to convert all the time. Not everybody, if you're selling a product, not everybody that you drive to your site is ready to buy a product right this moment. And so it's important that you have a strategy in place to figure out, well, what can we get them to do? If all they want is to read an article on my website, what's the next step in the funnel? And how do I get them there? Maybe it's subscribing to my newsletter. And if that's the case, how do I get them to subscribe? What do they need to see? What's going to be important for them? If if they have already subscribed to my newsletter, what can I show them in an email that will bring them to the next step of the funnel, which might be checking out my products, and so, but those are the things where what I do now is more focused on trying to figure out how do we progress people through the funnel and ultimately convert them into some kind of revenue, and that's a piece that I just wasn't even thinking about before.
Well, and it's funny, I think you mentioned earlier too that a lot of businesses don't really do the math on this conversion and stuff, but like I don't think they do this math either that you've just laid out, maybe more sophisticated companies and things like that, but like we're consulting with a group that's a small spa and they want to try and grow their business to something that they could then franchise. And I mean, these are the kinds of problems that we're solving for them now, which are sort of fundamental, right? I mean, they really should have fixed these problems like years ago. This is a 40-year-old operation,
right?
And we're discovering problems now, 40 years later, that are, I mean, little things like customer retention and pricing correctly and things like that, going through. But to your point, it's all about that funnel, right? And it's about moving people down the line, so like, we're talking to them about, bringing back existing customers. We're talking about improving the products and building out their customer journey a little bit more. So, but it's stuff that didn't even occur to them. They're so close to the situation, they didn't even see it. Right. So let's transition a little bit and let's maybe dig a little bit deeper on this entrepreneurial front. So you're talking a lot about the thing you do now. So how did you get from working for another company as an SEO guy to starting your own business and getting going in there? Like, when did you know was the right time to make the move, and how did that all happen?
Well, yeah, so there's never the right time to make the move.
I know, right?
Well, mine's been by layoff 3 times.
Right, so, yeah. So what ended up happening is, so I transitioned from doing SEO to doing conversion rate optimization after about 3 years of doing SEO. And I worked in-house for several companies. And I ended up at a company where we were running a lot of tests on our website to try to figure out how to convert people. I think we were running 40 or 50 tests a month on our site. And just by nature of the types of things that we were testing on our site, we needed a lot of design work. We needed a lot of development work. We needed a lot of bandwidth just to analyze what the heck was happening with all these moving pieces. And especially for design and development. I mean, I think every company struggles with having enough bandwidth for that kind of stuff. And so I started looking for somebody to outsource some of this stuff to, just to help us move more quickly. And I became pretty frustrated because I either found very cheap services with no expertise or very, very expensive services with lots of expertise. And I just couldn't find something that I could justify from a financial a cost perspective. And so around this time, my wife came from a very entrepreneurial family. I come from a very traditional family. My dad worked at the same company for 25 years and, that type of thing. And so I was really scared of the concept of starting a business just because of the risk that's involved. My wife, on the other hand, was constantly encouraging me. You should just start a business. You should start a business. I mean, we'd have people that were coming up to us, friends from the neighborhood, or, I'd have coworkers that would say, hey, I just, my friend started this business. Can you look at their website and give them some tips or some pointers or whatever? And so I had some idea that there was a need for this type of service, including my own need just for additional bandwidth. And so I had a conversation with, it was kind of similar to your experience. I had a decision. The company I was at the time was not doing very well financially. And so they said, you have 2 options in front of you. Number one is you take on a ton of additional responsibilities and, in order to justify your position at the company, or you can leave. And I had kind of been open that I had been thinking about starting a company at the time. And so I used that as my, okay, well, this, you know what, I'll take this opportunity. I'll try it out. And I met with several entrepreneurial mentors to get an idea of what do I need to do to make sure that I'm successful here? Like what kinds of things should I be thinking about? And I got a lot of really good advice. I think a couple pieces that were some of the best advice that I got. Number one was to set some very firm milestones for myself at like 6 and 12 months. That's like, here's how you'll know if you're succeeding at 6 months. And if you're not, then be willing to walk away. here's how you'll know that you're succeeding at 12 months. And if you're not, then be willing to walk away.
What were some of the things that they were telling you, this is what you need at 6 months and this is what you need at 12 months?
Well, and that's going to vary for every type of business. Now with an agency that like I started, it's easy to make a profit fairly quickly. And so for me, the milestones were at 6 months, if I'm on a trajectory to make enough to get by.
Right. And to pay the bills.
Yeah, and at 12 months, if I'm on a trajectory to make what I was making before, then that's, a pretty good setup. Now, of course, that would not be a good goal for an e-commerce company to have, or, almost any other type of business other than an agency. But that was for me, like, here's what I'm going to do. And if I have not met these milestones, I'm going to walk away. Because one of the things that I was told by several of these guys was, don't be like the pipe dream entrepreneur that's like constantly thinking that something great's going to happen soon. I promise something great, because, I had a wife and kids and I don't want to be dragging them along in this terrible ride, because being an entrepreneur is hard. There's a lot of stresses. It's sometimes a very lonely place to be. And there's all kinds of challenges and, it never goes the way that you expected. And so if you're not at least heading in the right direction, to go through all of that with no light at the end of the tunnel is a lot of entrepreneurs do end up doing that. And some people still persevere through that and are able to be very successful. And I was one where I was saying, I'm not willing to go through that. I am willing to persevere if there is light at the end of the tunnel. So Fortunately, a couple of things went very well in my favor. You mentioned you had AJ Wilcox on the podcast. So he's a good friend of mine. He actually trained me in SEO 10 years ago or whatever when I first got started. And I called him about a week after starting my business. And I was like, hey, I just started a company. I know you're working for a big firm here in Utah. I want to come pitch you guys. And he said, hey, funny that you should say you just started a company. I did too. And I'm not working there anymore. So I can't help you get an intro here, but that's super cool. And so we kind of stayed in contact and we're on similar revenue paths for the first probably 6 months of our business. And so he would kind of send me suggestions. Hey, I did this. It worked really well. I would send him suggestions. Hey, I started doing this networking group that, helped me get in front of people. You should try this out. And one of the things that he sent me was he was submitting a pitch to speak at MozCon, which is an SEO conference.
With Rand Fishkin.
With Rand Fishkin, who's no longer with Moz. But he, AJ was submitting a pitch, and I thought, they'll never accept me because I'm not speaking about SEO. I'm speaking about conversion optimization. But I'll submit a pitch anyways, because why not? And funnily enough, I ended up getting accepted, and he didn't. And so my first in my first 6 months of running my company, I got to go and speak in front of a crowd of 3,000 people.
Oh wow!
Which I was totally unprepared for. I mean, I probably practiced my presentation 150 times, but. That being said, this was my first time I had ever spoken at a conference.
Well, and now as a business owner and somebody who's looking to impress and win business and all this stuff,
exactly.
The stakes are high.
Stakes were very high, and I just did not feel like I had, like I was the right person to be speaking to all these people. Yet, even with all of that lack of self-confidence, I still ended up with several very large clients that came to me from speaking at that conference that really catapulted my business from like this kind of maybe this will work to like I had exceeded my 12-month goals within a month of speaking at that conference. And so I found a potential source of, great marketing for myself on accident, again, by the recommendation of a friend.
Did you almost grow too quick, or was it something that you could handle the workload? Because that's a big problem with a lot of startups is like, okay, we got this product, now it's growing so fast we can't keep up with it.
And I guess maybe the positive for like your line of work is it's largely intellectual work. It's, a lot of brain power more than it is, physically actually crafting a product or something. You're not building skateboards. So. Right.
Well, and so there was a lot of challenges to scale at that point because, it was fairly resource intensive on the design and development fronts. And at that point, I did not have anybody in-house that could do it. I didn't have, I was using actually a former coworker of mine. I was just contracting out to him to design, and then another guy to develop stuff. And so very quickly I had to look for, how can I scale beyond this? And so that's my first attempt at scaling was outsourcing through Upwork, which was I'm trying to remember what it was before Upwork.
It was Elance.
That's before, right. Yeah. And so I found some freelancers that were over in India and the Ukraine and other places like this that were very, very cheap. And I thought I was getting a killer deal, because I went from paying a guy $100 an hour to $10 an hour. And so I thought that I was really onto something here. Like, I'm going to increase my profit margins like crazy here. And yet it came with a whole host of new challenges.
Just communication issues, or just they messed up the actual
quality of work. Yeah, the quality of work dropped dramatically. And the communication barrier presented a serious challenge in increasing the quality. And so, I hired on somebody to basically project manage all of the freelancers. And even with those challenges, there was still a lot of challenges in outsourcing overseas. And so, I made an attempt at doing that, and it worked. It gave me the solution I was looking for at the time. But it would not have been possible to scale that very rapidly because of all of the quality.
Right. You burn so much time doing QA and making sure you're actually getting the product you're asking for.
Exactly.
That, maybe with somebody local or whatever, you might pay them more per hour, but you're paying for fewer hours. So
exactly.
It's done right, more or less the first time or two.
Although I did have a kind of a fun experience. I remember the first check I sent to my Indian developer, and it was for I can't even remember, probably 300 hours of work. And so it was, I don't know, $3,000, which I was happy to pay because that was only like a 10% cost for the revenue I was generating. But he went ballistic. He was like, I'm rich, it was like 400,000 Indian rupees. And so that was kind of a cool experience to.
How did the overall process go with something? It sounds like 300 hours is a fairly large project, but hiring someone in India to do it and finish it.
Are you 600 hours of management?
Yeah, because I'm right in the middle of a web project myself, and what's holding me back right now is the back end, connecting it to a database, the secure auth login, and all the stuff like that. I've thought about using Upwork to finish it, but I'm afraid that if I put this out there to some guy across the world and say, "Hey, finish this," I'm going to see a clone of it. I don't know what your project was, but that's something I've been nervous about. Is that something is that like an invalid nervousness? Or
I don't think it's invalid at all.
Okay.
I think that you get various qualities of work depending on who you end up working with. I mean, I remember I read The 4-Hour Workweek from Tim Ferriss, and
that's a good
I remember
one.
he talked about vetting out these virtual assistants and other offshore people, and and I found similar to what he shared, which was like you go through probably 8 to 10 people in order to find the one guy that you really want to work with, and so you can find somebody that you trust. That I ended up working with this developer that was not super entrepreneurial. He didn't work with a lot of clients, and I ended up being his only client for a very long time, and just because of the volume of work I was sending him. And so I was not worried about that at all because I knew he wasn't really working on any other projects. Now, I think that there's some definite validity to that concern, but I think it just depends on who you work with.
Yeah. It's finding the right guy pretty much.
And ultimately, I mean, if what you are providing is filling the need that you have, like the way that I've always felt is if I'm fulfilling my own need, I don't necessarily care unless it's something that I want to like patent. It's something that I got the value that I needed out of it. And if somebody else decides to rip it off, like I don't necessarily care.
Well, and that's always sort of been my attitude about it. I used to work with a woman who did a lot of manufacturing in Asia, and every time she'd roll out a new product in the States, the Chinese bootleg would roll out at the same time on Alibaba.
Yeah.
So you could buy the new colorway because it was something she didn't create, but suddenly it was available. But and she tried in the beginning chasing these guys down and suing them and stuff, but like it was just fruitless and expensive. And at some point, I think she just sort of rolled over, realized, hey, it just is what it is. If I want to pay Chinese prices and have Chinese manufacturers, then this is the roll of the dice, And so ultimately now she manufactures in the States as often as she can and stuff like that. But basically what she found, though, is it didn't really take from her sales.
Right, exactly.
She still did her own marketing. She still sold her product as she would. People weren't not buying her product to buy the bootleg.
Right. Well, unless you have a market in China. I mean, that's where the
now
bootlegs
they may
can
be
go,
selling
right?
a gazillion of them in China. Who knows?
Right.
But it's not really cutting into her margin, so to speak.
Yeah,
She's not
exactly.
marketing in China. So
that's what I've always felt like. I feel it's important. In fact, one of our core values at Disruptive is having an abundance mentality. And so for me, if it's working for me, I don't really care if someone else is finding success and they're not taking away from my business necessarily. Like if I wasn't planning on selling in China, I don't care if someone else sells my product in China. Now if I decide that I want to sell in China, I now have to deal with the consequences of being okay with other people selling my stuff in China. But I don't feel like, like I said, I have this abundance mindset of, that's great. If someone else had success by ripping off my stuff, and that's how AJ and I have talked about this a few times because, we talk about doing consulting projects for people where we will essentially give them the secrets of our trade, and the chance that, well, what if somebody is vetting my process and then copying it so that they can use it? And him and I have always felt the same. That may happen. And you know what? Like that's okay. I'm willing to give away my trade secrets because I don't feel like these secrets are what are going to make me successful.
Well,
I feel like there's a lot of other things.
Even the secrets, I mean, you can give someone a layout of exactly what to do, and the chances of them actually going and doing it are slim.
Well, that's the thing.
Exactly.
There's a whole industry around it. I mean, go to Barnes and Noble if there's still one existing near you, and look at all the business books. I mean, there are 1,000 people to tell you how to run your business, and if you follow Buffett to the letter, or if you follow Tim Ferriss to the letter, or whomever, like. Of course. Yeah, you could do what they're doing. They're giving you the secret sauce.
Yeah. But
that the part that is sort of where people fall apart is the execution step.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you can tell me all day that what I should be doing in marketing or what I should be doing in digital sales, but if I'm not doing it, or if I'm doing it poorly, or I'm doing it, in some other modality that I think's better because I know best, then I'm not going to see the same results, or it's going to be applied differently, or maybe they don't come to you for that at all. They come because they like your personality or whatever.
Yep.
And so you've crafted a relationship, and you just happen to know all this stuff too.
Right. Well, and the other thing that I've always been a big believer in is, and you could call it karma, you can call it whatever you want, but I believe that I've seen a lot of personal success by being willing to share very openly and freely. I believe it establishes a lot of trust with people that, this guy isn't just like, holding on to all of his, knowledge and wisdom and in order to make a buck. Like by sharing, I feel like I establish a lot of trust with people that actually leads to me getting more business rather than less. And so,
yeah, it's a little bit counterintuitive, but I think it's so true that just, being willing to sort of give of yourself before you expect something in return. I think, it establishes a credibility. It also develops that trust and, fosters that relationship. And also by being open, you encourage others to be open with you. And so, if you're willing to share your secrets, well, hey, let me tell you about the struggle I'm having in my company. I'd like to talk to you about this because you opened up to me about your business. I want to tell you about my business. And that's where these relationships start to snowball and become something of value. Well, financial value. I mean, it's already of value. But
yeah, and you could call it vulnerability if you want. There's some business vulnerability that happens, and I feel like for any meaningful relationship to happen, there has to be a mutual level of vulnerability. Like as I'm going in and talking with businesses. Actually, this is something that I find especially at like networking events. So I was just having a conversation about this yesterday. When I first started my company and I would go to networking events, it was all about me. It was just the me show. I went with a pocket full of business cards, and it was a successful event if I came home with no business cards because I gave them all out. I was just literally walking around just like dishing out my card to every person I saw.
No interaction.
Yeah,
just,
no
hey, here's my
meaningful
card, call me.
interaction.
Yeah.
And surprisingly, nobody ever called me from seeing my thing on the business card when we didn't have a meaningful conversation. And so I actually made a transition after a fairly short period of time. And when I realized that the business that I had gotten from these networking events was not from handing out business cards, but was from the one meaningful interaction that I had while I was at the event, where I may not have even had any business cards left to give to this guy. I was just like, and some guy reaches out and said, "Hey, we had a really great chat. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I'd love to hear more about what you do." And so, now when I go to business events, I don't even take business cards with me, partially to remind me that that's not what it's about. And so when I go to these networking events, I try to give, and I try to find a few meaningful conversations, and where I'm not just jamming my business down people's throats. And I find a lot more success from taking that approach where I give instead of just trying to get.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, no, I think that, it makes perfect sense. Well, I mean, it's like, the old car salesman model, the guys that they used to beat down the people, and you can win business that way, being super overbearing and preying on the weak, basically,
right.
and willing them into doing whatever it is you want them to do because they want you to go away or whatever. But then later they don't come back to your business. They're never happy with the car.
They're not referring their friends.
They're not telling their mom. They're not telling their friends. They're not doing anything for you. And so it doesn't work. I mean, like I just experienced this lately. I had a meeting last week with a guy at a digital marketing company, and we were talking to them about covering all their creative needs. And they, seemed really interested. We had a really great conversation. But I told the guy, I was like, for me, it's very important that you get the right person. So whether we fill the job for you or you hire somebody in-house, whatever, it's your business. I will help you do what you need to do to get the guy you need. And in fact, for this particular guy, he said, well, we're not sure if we want to outsource. We're still interested in doing this. And I mentioned, hey, I'm part of a Salt Lake City graphic designers thing on Facebook. Send me your resume or send me your job post, and I'll share it with the group. And I'll try and drive some creative to come work for you if I can be of any service to find that person. Well, I did that. He was stoked. He couldn't believe that I was willing to offer up the work to somebody else. And that led to the next meeting and the next meeting. Unfortunately, we're still fighting their trepidation on outsourcing. But nonetheless, I mean, I don't care. Like, I don't want to enter this relationship if he's unsure or if it's going to be uncomfortable or if they're always going to doubt or whatever. Like, I would so much rather he finds the person he wants and then he tells his buddy, oh my God, I can't believe you try working with this guy. He'll tell you if it works.
Exactly.
And if not, he'll help you find the guy.
Yep.
I would much rather have the reputation for being too helpful than be the guy that strong-armed everybody into winning business.
Yep, I agree.
And so, so I think that's a really good point and something good to talk about. So let's talk about, I guess, one of these things is sort of sales. So you talked about you got your first client through public speaking. If you were trying to educate somebody or teach somebody how to grow their business or something through digital marketing or whatever channels, like, how do you help somebody find their first client? So like in your case, maybe they came through the speaking event, but is that I don't know if that's the trick you give everybody.
Well, most people don't get that opportunity.
Yeah, right.
So,
or aren't inclined. There are a lot of people, especially in creative and tech, that are very introverted and not looking for that.
Yep.
How would you, or like, I guess in your situation, how did you find your first client? How did you go on to retain them? That kind of thing.
Yeah, and there's a variety of ways. I mean, it's like the hunter and the farmer type of approach. It's like it's not hunting with a rifle is going to make you more successful than hunting with a bow. It's just you take a few different approaches and you can be successful either way. And so, for people who are more introverted that don't really want, because one of the things that I felt like was super beneficial when I was trying to sell my business initially was going to networking events where I had to talk to a lot of people and I had to learn how to pitch my business in a very concise way. And really the way that I would distill it down is I had to learn what were my value propositions. What was I offering and how could I communicate my value propositions in as concise of a way as possible? And that translates exceptionally well online. Because when you are, if you're an introvert and you're not interested in going and talking to a bunch of people, you still need to figure out with your business, regardless of whether you're selling socks or selling your own services, you need to understand why do people want to buy this and what's going to ultimately resonate with them in your value propositions. And so if you're going to take to Google, for example, to get your business launched, which a lot of people do. And in fact, the company I merged with, Disruptive,
I was just going to ask you about that.
got their start exclusively through doing Google ads. And so, you can absolutely find success there. And the important thing to understand, again, you need to understand the numbers. You need to understand what can you pay to acquire somebody. But then you also need to understand, how do I message this? What is going to resonate with people? Because I could put on a Google ad. I probably couldn't put this on a Google ad, but I could put get free money from the government, and then trick them into clicking on my ad, and then they come there and realize that
it's just clickbait.
Yeah,
and
right.
Whenever I click on clickbait, I instantly close the tab. There's no follow through.
Well, and so to the conversation earlier about the value of that click, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what good is it to get 1 million clicks on this ad if 0 people convert?
Exactly.
And so, part of it's honesty and having integrity, but also, understanding what it is you're actually trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and so that's what you want is you want to make sure you are understanding, like, who am I marketing to? Who is this, like, the persona that I'm trying to get in front of, and what do I think is going to resonate with them? And now this is the part I think that most businesses get hung up is they get an idea of what they think their customer persona wants to see, and they stick with that forever. I mean, I've talked to so many clients that say, in fact, here's an example. So I have a client that they've been a client now for about 2 years. And when they came to us, they had spent $350,000 on this new site design. And when I asked, okay, well, what led to this site design? They said, well, we did a lot of research into our customer persona, and realized, well, they're finding us through Instagram. They're coming on a mobile device, and so we wanted to make sure that our website spoke to people who were coming from Instagram. I said, oh, how did you accomplish that? Well, we made our site look a lot like Instagram. And so, they put all these things in place, and, they had become so focused on this persona about this limited amount of information that they had, that they made all of these assumptions. Now that I know who my persona is, I know all of these other things that they want, and that's not necessarily the case. And so, we ran a test on their website. They had, on their homepage, they were selling a bunch of products, and you could just scroll and scroll and scroll, and it looked a lot like Instagram. And we challenged that assumption. One of the first tests we ran was challenging that, and so we created several different versions of their homepage where we had less products, where we removed sections, and we created like 8 different versions of their homepage and A/B tested all of them. And out of those 8 versions, 6 of them increased revenue and conversion rates to the point where they increased revenue by like $20,000 in a week.
Wow!
Just by removing stuff. And so we immediately challenged and debunked that assumption that people wanted something that looked like Instagram. And that same thing happens with ads as well. So again, going back to how do you find your first customer online? And I'm just assuming that we're talking about online.
Sure.
How do you find your first customer online? First, you create your persona. Second, you create what you believe are value propositions that you think will resonate with this audience. And then I think the most crucial step is testing different types of messaging to find out what actually will resonate. Because maybe I think that saying, the best value design services on the planet is what's going to resonate with people. But maybe they don't care about that. Maybe what they care about is a great customer experience, like, them interacting with me. Or maybe what they care about is I've got 300 design templates that they can choose from. Maybe that's what resonates with them. And so testing out some of these different value propositions and finding out what does resonate with people, what's going to get them to click, and then ultimately what's going to get them to convert if I say to them. Those are some of the most effective tests that I've seen run on both ads and on the website.
Okay.
So before we switch topics and talk about your merge with Disruptive, can you break down like A/B testing? With that example, you said you had like 8 different sites and you changed the layout. Did you actually go live with them, or did you get people to try it? Like how did that process
I think it's
go?
probably good just to talk a little bit about it. A/B testing makes sense for maybe you and me, but for the general masses, maybe it's not as black and white as maybe it seems.
So the way that we did that, so I'll take a step back and talk about what A/B testing is not, because when I talk to a lot of companies and I'll ask, have you ever done A/B testing on your website before? Almost every time businesses will say yes. And I'll say, well, tell me about it. What test did you run? say, oh, well, we created a new website design and we launched it, and then we compared our conversion rates to last week. And if they went up, then we knew the site was successful. If they went down, then it was a failure. And that's not an A/B test at all, because there's a variety of things that influence conversion rates on a day-to-day basis. So my conversion rates this week are going to be different than they were last week, because maybe there's a hurricane that's hitting the East Coast, and my conversion rates were going to go down no matter what, because most of my customers are on the East Coast. And now they're not getting online because they don't have sheltering. And they don't have internet. And so I think it's because my new website sucks. And in reality, there was something else that was influencing those conversion rates that was going to happen no matter what. And so, just launching something and comparing to past conversion rates is never a good way to judge the effectiveness of something. So the way that we do this, and when I say we ran 8 different versions of the homepage, we literally ran all of them simultaneously. And so we have a tool that will allow us to divert traffic to these different experiences. It'll basically say, here's the original homepage. Let's make 8 different copies of it, and on each one we'll change something. And then these tools that we use will allow us to say, okay, 1 out of every 8 people gets the original, 1 out of every 8 people gets the first version, and so it will randomly distribute traffic between these. And so it's kind of like the equivalent of like medical professionals testing drugs on people and randomly selecting people from the population, taking a list of people and just randomly selecting people so that they're not influencing the results somehow. Right.
Interesting.
So that way we get an equal distribution of traffic to all of these versions during the same time period with the same traffic, so that we can cancel out all the extra noise that's happening outside of our test. So if there is a hurricane, well, guess what? All of our variations got hit by the hurricane.
Right.
If there is some other event, maybe my PPC ads are changing, and or maybe I just ran a new sale, or maybe it's Black Friday this week. Whatever. That's going to happen on all of my versions, and so they'll all be impacted equally by that change.
And what type of stuff are you looking for? Like when you change something, are you looking for color content? Are you looking for designs? Are you looking for, just the layout of the site? I mean, like what affects traffic normally? Or
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So we've distilled that down into 6 categories. So what we typically try to do, so this is another mistake people make when they start A/B testing, is usually when people are trying to test their site, they're just looking for the big the big problem on their site, right? So it's like, oh, every time I go to my site, I notice that I have the map on there, and I just hate that. So I want to run an A/B test and remove the map. Well, maybe that will work, but the problem with that is that once you remove the map, you've got nothing else, right? It's like there's nothing else to do because I was just trying to fix the thing that bothers me. So what we try to do is we try to help our clients test through all of these different 6 areas to figure out which of them influence conversion rates, because it's going to be different on every website. So the 6 areas that we break it down into are value propositions. So what are your value propositions? Where are they positioned on the page? How many do you have? Those types of things. We look at the call to action. So what call to action should you be giving people? How is that communicated? How is it designed? Where is it positioned? We look at content. How much content should you have? How much content do people need? We look at diversions. So like the test that I explained where we were removing things from the page, we were actually removing potential distractions. Now, their distractions were just other products they sold, but they had too many and it was distracting people. And so, we test figuring out what is distracting people. And we also look at what might be causing anxiety on the site. Anytime you're asking someone for information or for payment, there's going to be some element of anxiety. So we look at what might be causing anxiety and how can we reduce that anxiety. And then we look at the mobile site. So especially if you're getting mobile traffic, you need to understand how is a mobile user different, and how should we be customizing a mobile experience for somebody who's on a mobile device. So those are the 6 areas. And like I said, not every website is influenced equally by all of these things. In fact, sometimes we will run a test on content and find out nothing happened. There was no change because people just don't care about the content.
Yeah.
Well, so in all your analysis of websites and stuff like this for clients, what have you found what are the biggest problems that most businesses have on their website?
The biggest problems by a long shot are usually distractions. So I found that every client that I've tested without fail, and I've run thousands of tests at this point, every client that I've worked with has at least one thing on every page of their site that is hurting conversion rates. And most frequently, it's just that they have too much stuff on the page. They have too much content, they have too many offers, they have too many call to actions, too many bright colors, not enough bright colors, like whatever. And so that's the number one thing. The second most important thing is value propositions. And most frequently, clients have too many value propositions listed on their site. So on like an e-commerce site, for example,
10% off this, 20% off that.
Yeah, 10% off, made in America, all natural, money back guarantee.
It's like the 60-second spot on the info TV,
right.
It's like,
and they just can't stop with the value propositions. And so
mypillow.com.
And so the challenge with that is when you have too much stuff, people tend to just ignore all of it. When you're able to focus somebody's attention on one or two value propositions, that's when you typically get the most bang for your buck. But again, the question is, which value propositions should I focus people's attention on?
And that might be a good A/B test, right?
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Whether let's go or buy now is more effective.
Or whether people respond better to 10% off or 30-day money-back guarantee. Like which one is ultimately important? Or if I sell food, do people care that it's gluten-free? Or do people care that it's grass-fed beef? I don't know.
That makes sense. Well, I think we're starting to get a little bit long, so let's talk about one other thing real quick. I think it's a big thing for you. It's something we haven't had a lot of opportunity to talk about on the show with other people, so I wanted to talk to you a bit about it. Is this merging or this acquisition? Mm-hmm. And I'm curious about sort of as your business grew and got to a certain level or level sufficient enough to start shopping it, like when did you know about that moment? How did you find the person who ultimately ended up buying it? And then anything you can share about the experience of that actual acquisition, how it's worked out, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I never actually got to a point where I was like, oh, you know what? I should start looking around. What happened was I was having success. And as I started meeting other business owners that were in relevant spaces, they just expressed interest organically, right? So it was different in the sense that I wasn't out like looking to...
You hadn't crafted this business specifically for sale.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I wasn't like going out trying to pitch somebody on acquiring my business. And so what happened was I met the owner of Disruptive Advertising at a networking event. I went in actually to just try to pitch him on my services to get him to use them. And then he kind of countered and said, well, this is interesting. I think all of my clients need what you do, because he was driving traffic through PPC, through Google and Facebook ads primarily. And so he said, I'm driving traffic and we struggle to get traffic to convert in a lot of cases. So my clients need your services. What if we merge businesses? And at the time, when we met, I was like 8 months in. I had just spoken at the conference, had a huge influx of business, and so I was not interested at all in having that conversation. And so I said no. He said, okay. Then he went and tried to start it anyways in his business. It didn't end up working for him. And then, and in the meantime, I continued running my business. And as I started to try to scale my business, I ran into a lot of issues. And the main issue was just me, my time. I was the bottleneck in scaling my business because I was the sales guy and I was the expert and I was the face and the voice of the business. And I was the only one who could go out and speak. And so it was like, well, how do I get someone else to sell it? How do I get someone else to fulfill when people want to be working with me? Like, how do I transition from people working with me to working with some other fulfillment person? We kind of talked about this before we started.
Yeah, and we've talked about this a little bit on other episodes. I'm not sure if they'll run in order, though, so I'll give you a little primer. But, I mean, basically, that's sort of the realization I've arrived at in my business, too, is that by and large, my clients come to my company to work with me because of referrals or networking or whatever. They come to work with me. So when I then delegate their work it kind of leaves yucky feelings for them. They go, oh, well, I thought I was working with you. I don't want to pay this guy what I would have been paying you.
Yeah.
So this is definitely a struggle.
Well, what they don't understand is they are getting you. They're getting you your final say on the product.
Well, I think that this problem is probably really common for like sort of solopreneurs, you call them, or whatever. They, entrepreneurs that kind of go it alone. So yeah, go ahead.
Well, and so part of my challenge, and I realized this after a lot of painful experiences trying to offload things on other people. Part of my challenge is that I was pitching it wrong. I was setting expectations improperly. I was setting, in my pitch, I was talking more about my expertise instead of the process that the company uses. Just subtle positioning types of things and subtle expectations that I was setting without even realizing it were kind of pigeonholing me into being the guy that needed to be involved. And so, anyways, as I started encountering a lot of these challenges, I met back up with the owner of Disruptive, and I think we went out to lunch, and he said, how's it been going for you? And I mentioned some of the challenges that I was running into, and I said, how have things been going for you? And he mentioned some of the challenges of trying to start this division of his company.
We tried to rip off your business, and it's just not working.
Exactly. And so we both had a pain point that the other person was, the other person could help resolve. And around the same time, I actually had a couple of other companies that were interested in acquiring or merging as well. And ultimately, one of the major decision-making factors for me was whether or not I trusted this potential partner of mine, because I've heard a lot of horror stories about people partnering up and just, becoming an absolute disaster. Either the other partner isn't as committed to the business as I am, or we're interested in heading two different directions and we're not aligned, or this guy decides to screw me over and then goes and takes half my business, whatever. And so there was a lot of red flags that, not specific to any of these people, but red flags that I was on the lookout for. And so with some of the other companies that I talked about merging with, I just didn't trust. There was just no level of mutual trust. Now with Disruptive, and the owner of Disruptive, his name's Jake, him and I just clicked very well, and I felt a lot of trust. I talked to other people that that had worked with him, and there was a very, very high level of integrity and trust, and I felt comfortable with it. And we spent hours and hours and hours whiteboarding different ways that this merger would work. And so ultimately it came down to figuring out something that I felt like, aligned, where we were able to align our strategic visions long term, where I felt like I had a good contingency plan. So for the first year that we merged, we had a very clearly defined contract of, if things don't work out in the first year, here's exactly how we're going to split things up. Here's exactly how we're going to part ways. And I felt like that was critical for me to feel comfortable doing this, because if it didn't work, I wanted to have a very clear exit plan for that.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Cool. So you guys decide to pull the trigger then, and you start going into business for, I guess together. Have you found that to be a beneficial experience? Do you have any regrets?
Zero regrets. So we've been merged now for 2.5 years, and I absolutely love it. I mean, it has been a really challenging and painful 2.5 years, but all good pain and good challenges. The types of pain that challenges you to expand into areas that you've never thought of before. Because once you start scaling a business beyond just you, then there's all kinds of new challenges. How do I train other people to do what I do as well as I do? How do I go from managing a personal book of business of, $20K a month to managing what we have now, which is like a book of business of like $250K a month.
Yeah.
How do you go from personally being involved in every client to now managing a team of people that are managing clients? How do you continue to innovate the product? How do you, there's just a lot of new great challenges that I've had to face. And how do you continue scaling once you've maximized one certain avenue of marketing for yourself? How do you explore into new areas of marketing and continue to scale so that your sales team is busy? And how do you get other people to sell it as well as you do?
Right.
I mean, it's a lot of fun challenges that have been really hard to figure out and have helped me grow a lot personally.
That's awesome. Well, cool. So to wrap up, let's. Do you just want to give a little plug for the business where people can find you online and all that kind of good stuff?
Yeah, sure. So our company is disruptiveadvertising.com, and I actually have a guide that I've put together. I have a lot of people that will ask me, how do I get started in A/B testing? Like, what you've talked about is intriguing. I'd like to try it out. And so we put together a starter guide for people that have all the tools that we typically recommend people use. Some of the initial few tests that we would suggest people run on their sites, and a lot of other good stuff. And so people can get that at disruptiveadvertising.com/guide. And there's a little box if people are interested in talking with me or somebody at Disruptive, they can check this box. And if you're just interested in the guide, just don't check the box. And you can get it.
Cool. Well, and we'll share these links online and everything. Then we also had at Chris Daley on Twitter and LinkedIn if people want to try and catch up with you. And yeah, if they have any questions or anything. Mike, anything else?
I think I'm good. Thank you for coming in and spending the time. I learned a lot today.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Really cool. So as usual, you can find the show at eggscast.com, at Eggs Show on Twitter and Instagram. We're on iTunes, Stitcher, Player at FM, Google Play, any place you can find good quality podcasts. Mike at djontic.com. And Ryan, r2mg.com, ryanrogar.com, and we should probably pitch the studio a little bit real quick too. So we're shooting. This is the new studio that we're recording out of. It's like located in Access Salt Lake, downtown Salt Lake. It's available for bookings for podcasts, voiceover, audiobook, whatever you've got, anything audio. And we'd love to hear from you. So come check out the studio sometime, accesssaltlake.com.
Hit us up for a tour. You're more than welcome to come check it out.
Yep. Anyway, so with that, everybody have an awesome week. We'll catch you next time.